why I quit chasing cash flow and how it made me richer. For years, I chased high cash flow deals. Everything looked good on paper. Rentals that look great on paper, well, there's something with them. 10% returns, 12% returns, even higher. That's what I was chasing. But here's the truth that nobody tells you. Cash flow might make you feel rich, but it won't make you wealthy. Today, I'll break down why I stopped chasing cash flow and what I focus on instead. Because if you're addicted to cash on cash numbers, you need to see this. On the surface, cash flow deals look like a win-win, and they can be. They are great investments for the cash flow. But you're collecting monthly rents. You're seeing double-digit returns. But here's what's really happening. You're buying in a weak market with usually no appreciation. This can be truly problematic because the reality is you're actually needing appreciation. See, you wind up managing properties with high turnovers, high maintenance costs, unusual situations, low rent growth markets, and those are what get higher cap rates because somebody else already knows that. And then you're stuck holding an asset that won't scale, or you can't exit it cleanly, or not for near the amount that you want. High yield isn't the same as high value, and eventually the treadmill will burn you out. What's the biggest myth about high cash flow deals that I used to believe? Well, I used to believe that cash was king, and the more I could get in the mailbox every month, the better off I would be. But what I began to see is all the things that began to eat that cash flow that looked like a cap 10 that really brought it down to a 5 or a 3. And that's what you have to avoid. See, these properties make you feel profitable because you're getting a lot at the end. You bought something for $1 million that's producing $100,000 in net cash flow every year on the year that you bought it. And a lot of people know that they are going to sell in the next 12 to 18 months. And so they put their money in the year before, they make all the improvements that are going to be able to coast through it, or they avoid doing repairs and remodels that need to happen, and they delay those so that they don't see those expenses on their balance sheet. So when you're looking at it and you're going through the expenses and you're seeing it, it looks like it's a really good deal. But then you bought deferred maintenance. You bought something where maybe the rents aren't really the rents. What do I mean by that? You know, one of the things that I learned early on is that you check the bank account against the rent roll. Why would you do that? Well, just because Bob said he got $1,000 out of that unit, you don't know that until you check Bob's bank account. And then you see that Bob only deposited $900. And when he did this rent for Susan, and he said he got $1,100, but he really only got $1,050, those numbers matter because it's not that you can't lie when you're talking to your bookkeeping, and you wouldn't know that unless you reconciled with the bank account. And so that's one trick that I learned, but it's really keeping the property profitable. And if you're not able to do that, then you're going to spend money on repairs, on remodels, on updating fire systems, on deferred maintenance on the exterior, on putting a new roof on the property that's going to cost you thousands of dollars that you're going to get back over the next 30 years, but it's going to crush your cash flow right now. So these properties will feel profitable for a couple of months until the bill comes in for the roof or for the fire sprinklers or for the massive maintenance that needs to be done on the exterior siding because it's really dilapidated and it's not in great shape. And those will keep your operation small because you're going to either use up all your profits, worse yet, you're going to wind up shoving in your own cash, which was destined for another deal, into keeping this property afloat. And it can be detrimental to your cash flow and your profitability and your future. So if cash flow isn't king, what should you be chasing instead? Well, I'll tell you what you should be chasing. You should be chasing appreciation. And appreciation comes in the form of increased rents. What I would be more concerned about is looking back at the 12, 24 month T24 on this deal and see where they had raised rents. I would be exploring the area and looking at where my competition had raised their rents. What were their rents a year ago? What were their rents 2 years ago? What's still left on the apple to bite? And if there's not much left and you're not seeing rents in the area, then you're in a situation where you may be buying good cash flow now, but if it's not going to appreciate and be able to increase that cash flow in the future, you're going to be stuck right where you're at. And that means that 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're still going to be getting that same $1,000 a month for rent, and your property has not appreciated. See, one of the things that most people don't realize is that cash flow pays the bills and pays you, and that's important. But the more important thing is that your rents increase and appreciates the value of your property so that 2, 3, 4 years from now, your property is worth 5 to 10% more because the rents have come up 5 to 10%. Now, on $1,000 rent, that's only $100. But if you're able to consistently do that and you bought a $1 million property, you're going to receive $100,000 in appreciation for just a 10% rent increase. And that's where the real money is made in the multifamily game. Well, that's really where the real money is made in any real estate investment. It's in that appreciated rents. See, I've had deals that look like cash machines, but then you replace the roof, the tenants bailed, you realize that the tenants, man, they are really not great tenants, and the property value will stagnate. Then you're going to find yourself like I did, working harder than ever to protect the income that isn't really there and that didn't scale. Meanwhile, my friends who bought in better markets and with better teams saw real equity growth. And that one pivot changed everything, and it can change everything for you. So one of the other things that I'll tell you is when you get into a deal and things are going great, there's nothing more invigorating. But the other side of that is true, is if you get into a deal and nothing is going right, there's nothing more deflating than that. You find yourself spending more and more time and energy on a deal that you hate more and more by the day. And as your despise for this property grows, the amount of good, clean work that you're doing on it begins to degrade. So when I really saw that I was chasing yield, and yield is more than cash flow, it's more than just owning the units. It's about getting it to the next step where you can really cash out and see the appreciation and see the hard work that came with that. It was probably about 15 years ago, no, it was probably 25 years ago, that I really saw what the difference was, and I saw it in my own family. See, my father had a habit of finding the cheapest piece of industrial property he could find and building one of the least expensive buildings he could put on it. And he thought he had great cash flow, and he did. The thing about it was, what he found was that by buying the cheaper piece of property, he was maybe in the more industrialized area of the property and wasn't getting top dollar rents. And then he stayed under market compared to the best properties around the whole time he was involved with that property. So the reality was that yes, he paid less for his property, but he got less return on it. And as the rest of the properties around him in better areas were taking 3 and 5 and 7% rent bumps, he was only taking 2 and 4 and 6% rent bumps. So at the end of the day, his return on capital spent was much smaller. And when I saw that, I look back at the McDonald's market. The McDonald's will go in and buy the most expensive piece of property in a town and put a very expensive building on it. But you know, I just drove by a McDonald's the other day that they built while I was in high school, and it's still there, and it's still one of the best locations in town, and the line was still long. And so when you realize what you're really trying to do, and you're realizing the long game that real estate investing is, you can see where these are the principles that you want to apply, and not just necessarily to chase the cash flow. Now I focus on 3 things: long-term appreciation, strategic leverage, and tax efficiency. That means better locations, better teams, and bigger upside. Cash flow is still part of the equation, but it's not the driver. So in one of my other videos, I talked about the markets that I look at and what I look for in those markets. And if you want more information on that, feel free to watch that video. But one of the things that I always look at is where is the wage growth growing the best? And those are the markets that I focus on. So now I don't get outside my filter that says this is the market I want to be in. I don't look at 2 towns over, or if I'm looking at Phoenix, I don't look at Tucson because Tucson doesn't fit the same way that Phoenix does. So when I learned that my filter is my protector and I look at those deals in that area, I'm able to focus on the best of what is in my buy box. And if I'm able to do that, I'm able to stay more focused and underwrite the deals a little bit better every single time and continue to get market knowledge. You know, when you look at large multifamily syndicators and REITs, they tend to go very deep in a particular market. They go thousands of units in one market because they can then have, one, a determining factor on that market, and two, they understand the market better and better and better with every single deal. So if you're going to continue to do that, you're going to see the same kind of clarity that they did. And if you're early on in your investing career, you should really start to think about income versus wealth. And now I know that a lot of investors are doing real estate as a side gig that can replace their day job. But a lot of people have an unrealistic expectation on how long it's going to take for them to use their side gig for their replacement of their income. And that often takes longer than people give it credit for. They think they can do that in 3 to 5 years, and oftentimes it takes 7 to 10. But then again, if you're looking at creating real wealth, you're going to want to stay in your day job as long as you can, because that's what's funding your ability to create real wealth. If you're stuck chasing monthly returns, you might miss the bigger win. You might miss the bigger picture. I know I've made that mistake, and I know my dad did too, but you don't have to. If you want to see how to build scalable wealth through better deals, hit the subscribe and book a call. There's links below for you to follow. If you're thinking about buying your first property, I made a video for you. It's one I wish I would have seen when I started. So watch it now. It's on the screen.